Have you ever wondered why some women never seem to chase, but always get chosen? Why their silence feels stronger than someone else's loud declarations of self-worth? In a world obsessed with performing, proving, and persuading, there's a quiet power most people overlook. It's the kind of energy that doesn't beg to be seen. It demands to be felt. But here's the issue. Most dating advice tells you to talk more, prove more, and be high value by constantly asserting. It sounds exhausting, right? And here's the truth. They've got it backward. Let's challenge a common myth that your worth is something you have to advertise, that if you don't say it, show it, and shout it, you'll go unnoticed. But what if the real secret wasn't about doing more, but about being more? Not louder, but deeper. Not busier, but calmer. That's the transformation this guide offers. That's the Stoic difference. Right now, women everywhere are tired. Tired of keeping conversations alive that should flow naturally. Tired of shrinking themselves to be chosen. Tired of over-explaining their hearts and overcompensating for someone else's silence. If you've felt that, if you've been her, pause. Because what you're about to learn will change not just how you date, but how you live. These are not just techniques. They're philosophies rooted in Stoicism, where calm is strength and clarity is irresistible. These methods don't ask you to be anything you're not. Instead, they help you peel back everything you're not supposed to carry. We're going deep into energy, boundaries, transformation, and the soul-level work that speaks volumes without a single word. And yes, this goes beyond dating. It's about Stoic relationships, the kind that don't depend on performance, but presence. The kind that begin with who you are when you're not trying to impress anyone. If you've ever felt like your silence was misunderstood, or like you had to do more to earn love, this is your moment. We're rewriting that script quietly, confidently, and powerfully. Stay with me, because by the time we get to number 6, you'll understand why silence isn't empty, it's full of answers, and why the right man doesn't just hear your words. He feels your worth in every breath you take. Ready to step into that kind of magnetic energy? Let's begin. 1. Own your worth without apologies. What does it really mean to own your worth without apologies? Think about that for a moment. Not in the way social media tries to package it into sound bites and hashtags, but in the way you carry yourself in silence when no one is watching. When the date ends, when he doesn't call, when you're staring at your own reflection wondering, am I enough? The answer is yes. And not because someone else validated you, but because the truest form of power is internal. It's the unshakable belief that your value doesn't fluctuate with his interest. This is where Stoicism becomes your armor, your compass. It's about centering your identity not on how others perceive you, but on how firmly you stand in who you are. In Stoic relationships, a woman does not define herself by external praise or attention. She defines herself by her own alignment with truth and virtue. So let's challenge a damaging narrative right now, that you need to prove you're worthy of love. Where did that even come from? Why have we accepted this idea that love must be earned like a paycheck, justified like an argument, or displayed like a resume? If that's the game, no wonder so many of us are exhausted, because love that must be earned is love that can be lost the moment you stop performing. But what if you were never meant to perform? What if you're quiet, unwavering? Presence was the point all along? Think of the times you were with someone and felt like you had to keep the energy alive, joking, laughing, asking questions, overthinking your body language, curating your every word. Was it connection or control? Did you feel intimacy or anxiety? When you operate from the belief that you have to maintain his interest, you're already off balance. You're building on sand, not stone. That's not Stoicism. That's survival mode. And you, my dear, were not built for survival. You were built for peace, depth, and alignment. The first shift begins when you stop apologizing for who you are, not just in words, but in micro-behaviors. Every time you over-explain, apologize for your needs, or shrink your truth to maintain his comfort, you tell yourself subconsciously, my truth is too much. My boundaries are negotiable. My energy is up for grabs. But here's what the Stoics knew, and what you must reclaim. Your power begins where people-pleasing ends. Marcus Aurelius said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That includes how you show up in love. It's not about wearing armor, being cold, or pretending not to care. It's about being so centered in your self-worth that you don't need to overcompensate. If he pulls away, your energy doesn't chase. If he doubts, your light doesn't dim. If he forgets your value, you don't forget it with him. That's the kind of quiet power that doesn't scream, doesn't chase. It simply is. Imagine walking into a room and not needing anyone to affirm you to feel confident. Imagine sitting across from a man and not calculating your next move, but simply being. Imagine holding your ground in silence during tension and letting that silence say more than any argument could. That is the power of owning your worth without apologies. It's not a performance. It's not about being the most charismatic, the most witty, or even the most beautiful. It's about being whole. Men feel that. Real men, the ones who are emotionally awake, who seek depth over drama, who are inspired by truth. Those men notice a woman who walks in calm confidence. They're not intimidated by her silence. They lean into it. They listen differently. But here's the twist. Not all men will. And that's not your failure. That's your filter. Because when you embody your worth, the wrong men fall away. They won't feel safe in your boundaries. They'll call your calm cold, your clarity difficult, your silence unavailable. Let them go. You are not for everyone. You're not meant to be. You're meant to be for someone whose nervous system relaxes in your presence because he knows he doesn't have to perform either. Because you've done the work to not perform, he feels invited into authenticity too. That is the quiet power of Stoic relationships. Both partners show up whole, not hungry. So ask yourself right now, are you showing up whole or hungry? Are you seeking validation or are you expressing truth? Are you broadcasting choose me or are you rooted in I choose me first? The more you root into self-respect, the less you feel the need to explain it. Your boundaries won't come with disclaimers. Your preferences won't feel like burdens. Your worth won't be on trial every time you walk into a room. Because when you own it, truly own it, it becomes a frequency, not a feature. And that frequency shifts everything. You start noticing how men treat you changes. The emotionally unavailable ones disappear. The ones who need someone to fix or impress them vanish. And what's left? Space. Beautiful, sacred space for the kind of connection that doesn't require performance. The kind that begins with presence, not pressure. This shift will challenge you. At first, you'll feel the temptation to backpedal, to explain yourself, to people please, to say sorry for things you're not truly sorry for. Don't. Hold the line. When your silence feels awkward, stay with it. When your truth feels too much, speak it anyway. When your energy starts to feel too sacred to spend on surface-level men, protect it. That is the real inner work. That is how you speak without speaking. That is how you show him your worth without a single word. Because what matters most is not what you say, but what you believe in the silence between your words. That's where your truth lives. That's where your power is. And that's what Stoicism teaches us. When you align with your values, you don't need to raise your voice. You become the lighthouse, steady, clear, unshaken. Ships will either be drawn to your light or drift away. Let them. You're not here to chase, you're here to shine. So own your worth quietly, boldly, without apologies. 2. Recharge your energy like a high-voltage battery. Let's get brutally honest for a moment. When was the last time you asked yourself how full your inner battery really is? Not how productive you've been, not how many people you've helped, not how presentable or pleasing you've looked today, but how full you actually feel, internally, energetically, spiritually. Because here's the truth. No one tells you loud enough. Your energy isn't just something you give away. It's the essence of your magnetism, the invisible force that determines whether people lean in or slowly drift away. And yet, most of us walk around treating ourselves like a smartphone stuck on 5%. Just barely enough charge to keep going, always afraid we'll die out at the worst moment. We pour out smiles, "I'm fine," yeses when we mean no, conversations we didn't want to have and favors we didn't want to give. Then we wonder why we feel so invisible, so tired, so unseen. Let me ask you this: why are you trying to light up someone else's world when your own fuse box is fried? It's not noble, it's not romantic, it's self-abandonment. In Stoic Relationships, energy is sacred currency. You don't spend it on every flicker of attention. You invest it where it grows. Think of your energy like electricity. It needs a source, a rhythm, and a flow. Without that, you'll short-circuit every connection, no matter how promising it looks at first. This is why men are drawn to women who are grounded in their own energy. It's not because they're performing, it's because they're powered. That's the difference. So many of us were taught that the way to be attractive is to be agreeable, present, low maintenance, always available, always cheerful. But what does that really create? It creates a shell, a dimmed version of you that operates on fumes and calls it love. But love without self-restoration is not love. It's emotional martyrdom, and it's time we stopped confusing the two. Recharging your energy isn't selfish, it's foundational. You don't expect your phone to run on 1% all day without crashing. Why are you any different? Every time you ignore your need for rest, solitude, reflection, or stillness, you send yourself a message. My energy isn't worth protecting. But it is. Because when your energy is full, you show up differently. You walk into a room and shift the atmosphere, not because you're loud, but because you're alive. You speak less, but say more. You smile not because you have to, but because you feel it. You become unforgettable, not because you tried, but because you are. Stoicism teaches us that we cannot control what others do, but we can control how we respond, how we prepare, and how we protect what is ours. And your energy is one of the most precious things you own. Guard it like your life depends on it, because in many ways it does. The woman who recharges regularly, who knows when to pause, who walks away to reset rather than push through pain, she becomes the rarest kind of presence in a man's life. Not the always-on, always happy performer, but the deeply rooted, unshakable force of nature, the kind who inspires without effort, who heals by being, who gives not out of obligation, but from overflow. And here's the magic. When you operate from overflow, you stop resenting what you give. You stop measuring love in effort and start feeling it in alignment. You stop fearing silence. You start embracing space. And space, my love, is where attraction is born, because mystery doesn't exist in noise, it lives in stillness. And when you're constantly pouring out energy trying to maintain his attention, you kill the very oxygen the relationship needs to breathe. What would happen if you didn't text first, if you didn't fill the silence, if you didn't plan every date or decode every emoji? Would it fall apart, or would you finally see it for what it really is? That is the truth Recharge reveals. The relationships built on your effort alone can't survive your stillness. And that's a blessing, not a curse. Because the man who's meant for you will not panic when you rest. He will not punish your silence. He will rise into the space you create. He will match your energy, not drain it. He will find your stillness not boring, but sacred. But you'll only know this if you give yourself permission to stop performing long enough to see what stays when you're not constantly shining. That's the challenge. That's the growth. That's Stoicism in action. Not reacting, not controlling, not chasing, but conserving, observing, and protecting what is yours. And here's something else Stoicism teaches us. Not everything requires your response. Not every message deserves your energy. Not every moment calls for your presence. You get to choose. That's not cold, it's clear. It's how you maintain your center in a world that constantly wants to pull you out of it. So what's the first step? Take inventory. Where are you bleeding energy without return? What conversations leave you drained? What habits pull you out of alignment? What people confuse your kindness with availability? Then draw the line. Recharge your battery, not as a luxury, but as a non-negotiable. Because when you're fully charged, your worth becomes undeniable. It glows from within. It radiates without effort. It's felt in your laughter, your silence, your walk, your gaze. And the right man, he won't just notice, he'll be drawn. So if this resonates, if you've been the drained woman and you're ready to become the magnetic one, do this. Like this video and comment #1 if you feel the truth of this in your soul. And if you're new here and want more grounded wisdom on stoic relationships, self-worth, and feminine power that doesn't require performance, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. We're just getting started. 3. Set boundaries that command respect. What do you believe boundaries actually are? Are they rules you quietly hope others won't cross? Are they preferences you mention with a nervous laugh? Or are they powerful, silent statements of self-worth, non-negotiable lines that define how your energy, body, and spirit deserve to be treated? Let's get one thing clear. Boundaries are not barriers to connection. They are the sacred structure that makes authentic love even possible. Without boundaries, relationships become performances. With boundaries, they become partnerships. And yet so many of us have been conditioned to feel that setting boundaries is rude, harsh, or cold. Especially when it comes to men, we fear being too much, too difficult, too independent. But ask yourself, what has shrinking those boundaries cost you so far? How many times have you said yes when you meant no? How many times have you stayed silent because you feared his reaction? How many times have you tolerated behaviors that made your heart sink just to avoid conflict? That's not love, that's self-neglect. In Stoicism, the ultimate discipline is not physical, but internal. It's the ability to remain in alignment with your values, no matter the external pressure. And boundaries are your way of saying, I honor myself more than I fear your reaction. That is not arrogance. That is clarity. That is not selfish. That is sovereignty. In stoic relationships, boundaries are not punishment, they are presence. They show a man exactly where you stand without the need for endless conversations or justification. You teach people how to treat you not by what you tolerate once, but by what you consistently allow. And every time you let something slide that bruises your values, you are whispering to yourself, I am not worth protecting. That is a dangerous message to internalize. Because over time, you begin to erode your own sense of self. You become more anxious. You second-guess yourself more often. You start to perform emotional labor to maintain peace that should never have been disturbed. And before you know it, your identity becomes tethered to someone else's comfort. That is not a relationship, that is a slow disappearance of self. But when you set boundaries, real, clear, unapologetic ones, you don't push people away. You allow the right ones to come closer. Why? Because clarity creates safety. When a man knows where you stand, he can trust your yes, respect your no, and find peace in your presence. He no longer has to guess, perform, or test your limits. He either rises to meet your standards or reveals his inability to do so. Either way, you win. Either way, you stay rooted. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." The same applies to women. Waste no time convincing a man what respect looks like. Live it. When you carry yourself with that level of self-respect, the air around you changes. You don't need to argue for your worth. You embody it. That's what makes boundaries magnetic, not because they are harsh lines of rejection, but because they are sacred invitations into intimacy that's rooted in respect. They whisper, "This is how you can know me deeper, by honoring what I hold sacred." But to get to that place, you must first ask, do I believe I'm worthy of boundaries? Because if you don't, no one else will either. Boundaries begin with belief. Belief that your time matters, that your body deserves safety, that your mind deserves peace, that your emotions are valid. And once you accept that as truth, enforcing those boundaries stops feeling like conflict. It starts feeling like coming home to yourself. So how do you communicate them without ever raising your voice? Through action, through consistency, through choosing to walk away instead of engaging with disrespect, through pauses instead of explanations, through exits instead of arguments. When you stop tolerating poor behavior, you don't just change the relationship, you change your entire field of energy. People sense it. They either adapt or disappear. Both are blessings. One teaches you love, the other teaches you clarity, and both protect your spirit. And let's talk about something else: recovery. Because many of us were raised or conditioned in environments where boundaries were seen as disobedience, where saying no meant guilt, where self-care meant selfishness. So it's normal if at first setting boundaries feels like betrayal. But hear me when I say this, it's not betrayal, it's reclamation. You are reclaiming your right to peace, your right to be honored, your right to protect your light. And in Stoicism, that's the ultimate act of discipline, staying true to your internal compass no matter what the outside world demands. It's about choosing what's right for your soul over what's comfortable in the moment. And let's not ignore the discomfort. It's real. Sometimes setting boundaries will hurt. Sometimes it will cost you people. Sometimes you will cry, alone wondering if you were too harsh for walking away from someone who refused to honor your no. But with time, that pain transforms into peace, into strength, into clarity so sharp it slices through the fog of old patterns. And what rises from that space is a woman who no longer begs to be chosen. She chooses herself again and again, until only those who truly respect her remain. That is the foundation of all healthy, stoic relationships. Mutual respect born from individual wholeness, not fear, not people-pleasing, not codependency, but clarity. And from that clarity comes freedom. The freedom to love deeply without losing yourself. The freedom to be soft without being stepped on. The freedom to walk away from what doesn't nourish you without questioning your value. So ask yourself, where do I need to build a fence, not a wall? Where have I been inviting weeds into my garden and wondering why nothing grows? What truths am I afraid to speak because I fear abandonment more than I crave authenticity? These are the questions that change your life, not because they give you easy answers, but because they invite you into deeper alignment. And alignment is everything. It's what makes your presence speak before your mouth opens. It's what makes men respect you even in silence. It's what turns your no into a magnetic moment of self-command. So do not apologize for your standards. Do not soften your edges for men who benefit from your confusion. Do not trade your peace for proximity. Protect your energy. Honor your spirit. Guard your joy. Because once you set that standard, you don't just attract love. You attract reverence. And reverence is the rarest, richest form of connection. It begins not when someone finally understands your worth, but when you stop apologizing for it. 4. Let go of control and trust the flow. How often have you caught yourself trying to manage someone else's behavior, reactions, or emotions, especially in love? Be honest. Maybe you didn't call it control. Maybe you called it caring, being responsible, or just trying to make things work. But if we're being real, how much of that effort came from a deep fear that if you stopped steering the ship, it would sink? That if you didn't hold everything together, the man would drift, disconnect, or forget your value? The truth is, control masquerades as love far more often than we care to admit. But it's not love, it's fear wearing a costume. And fear, when it becomes the foundation of your energy, drives people away faster than silence ever could. In Stoic relationships, one of the highest forms of love is trust. Trust in yourself, trust in timing, and yes, trust in the natural flow of connection. Stoicism teaches that we do not control events, only our response to them. And in love, this means releasing the need to script every moment, analyze every text, or predict every outcome. It means stepping back, not to disengage, but to observe, to breathe, to become still enough to see what's real. Because when you let go of control, something magical happens. You become peaceful. And peace is powerful. It's rare. It's attractive. It tells the world that you are not desperate for direction because you already trust your path. And here's the paradox. The more you try to control love, the more you suffocate it. Love, like water, needs space to move, to breathe, to expand. When you grip it too tightly, it slips through your fingers. But when you hold it gently, with open palms and steady presence, it flows back to you in ways you never expected. Ask yourself, what are you afraid will happen if you stop trying to make it work? What if you allowed the silence to stretch? What if you didn't check the phone again? What if you trusted that if he's meant for you, no amount of space will scare him off? That's where the real confidence lives, not in control, but in surrender, not in managing, but in allowing. And yes, at first, it feels terrifying. It feels like weakness, like failure, like abandonment. But that's only because you've been taught that your value is tied to your usefulness, that if you don't chase, nurture, or explain, you'll be forgotten. That's a lie. The truth is, the most magnetic women are not the ones doing the most. They're the ones who've learned to trust their stillness. They're the ones who don't panic when he pulls back because they know space reveals truth. They're the ones who don't over-explain because their energy says enough. They're the ones who know that the right man doesn't need a script. He just needs your presence. Letting go of control doesn't mean giving up. It means letting go of outcomes that were never yours to hold. It means saying, I will not sacrifice my peace for someone else's comfort. It means choosing to be so rooted in your own truth that you no longer need to persuade anyone to see your value. You simply let them, or not. Their reaction is not your responsibility. Your job is not to curate someone else's experience of you. Your job is to be the clearest, calmest, most honest version of yourself, and let others meet you there or step aside. Marcus Aurelius said, accept the things to which fate binds you and love the people with whom fate brings you together, but do so with all your heart. That's not passivity. That's presence. That's the heart of Stoicism, not resisting what is, but flowing with it, because what's meant for you is not fragile. It doesn't need micromanagement. It doesn't need persuasion. It will find you in your calm. It will stay through your stillness. It will respond not to pressure, but to your authenticity. So how do you practice this? Start by noticing when you tighten your grip, emotionally, mentally, or energetically. Notice when you rehearse conversations in your head, when you obsess over his words, when you replay the text thread looking for clues. Then pause, take a deep breath, return to yourself. Remind yourself that you don't need to chase what is aligned. That your value is not proven by effort but by embodiment. The more you live your truth, the more clarity you invite. And clarity doesn't need to force, it simply reveals. The more you trust the flow, the more you filter out what was never meant for you. Because here's the truth, if love requires constant management, it isn't love, it's emotional debt. And you are not here to pay someone else's overdue balance with your peace. You are here to love fully, freely, but never foolishly. To give deeply, but never blindly. To stay open, but never unguarded. That's the balance. That's the flow. That's the discipline of stoicism in relationships. It asks you to trust not just the other person, but yourself. To believe that your presence is enough, that your peace is precious, that your silence has weight. When you begin to embody that, something in you changes. You no longer ask, "Does he like me?" You ask, "How do I feel in his presence?" You no longer wait anxiously for his next move. You observe, you trust, you allow. And that shift, that inner reorientation, is the beginning of everything. Because when you no longer feel the need to control love, you begin to attract a higher kind of connection, one that flows, one that breathes, one that doesn't just survive your stillness, it's built on it. If this spoke to something deep in your soul, show your energy like this video and drop a number 1 in the comments to let me know it resonated. And if you're not subscribed yet, this is your moment. Hit that subscribe button right now so you don't miss the next piece in this journey into powerful Stoic relationships that don't just inspire, but transform. 5. Embrace the power of confident silence. Silence. What comes to mind when you hear that word? Is it emptiness, discomfort, awkwardness, or could it be something deeper? Something most people are too distracted or afraid to truly understand. In a world where noise equals validation and constant chatter passes for connection, silence has become a rare and misunderstood form of communication. But here's what few realize. Confident silence is not the absence of words, it is the presence of self. It's not passive, it's potent. In fact, in Stoic relationships, silence is the quietest revolution you can stage because it signals something few dare to embody: self-mastery. When you resist the urge to fill space, to explain yourself, to rescue others from their discomfort, you are not withdrawing, you are anchoring. Think of a moment when you felt the tension rising in a conversation, maybe with a man you care about. Every part of you wanted to clarify, to justify, to ease the tension with laughter, or soften your boundaries to smooth things over. But you didn't. You stayed still, you said nothing. You allowed the moment to breathe, and in that breath, power was born. That is the moment your presence becomes undeniable. Because true presence doesn't need performance. It radiates through stillness. It communicates trust in oneself so loudly that others feel it in their nervous systems. Why is this so magnetic to men? Because it's so rare. Because it stands in stark contrast to the energy of desperation or anxiety or need. Because when you don't fill silence with noise, you let truth rise to the surface. And truth, unforced, is impossible to ignore. We've been conditioned to believe that silence in relationships is dangerous, that if he's quiet, something's wrong, that if you don't speak, you'll be misunderstood. But silence is not the enemy. Disconnection is. And when silence comes from calm, centered presence rather than withdrawal or punishment, it creates a space for deeper connection. Plato, whose influence echoes throughout Stoicism, said that truth is best revealed in silence. That's because silence holds up a mirror to both people in the room. It reveals intention, energy, authenticity. It shows who is comfortable being real and who needs constant stimulation to feel safe. And here's what silence reveals in you. It shows whether you are grounded in self-worth or seeking constant reassurance. It shows whether you can sit with discomfort or need to fix it immediately. It shows whether you trust your energy to speak louder than words ever could. When you sit in confident silence, you send a man one of the clearest messages he will ever receive. Not a challenge, not a game, but a signal. I trust myself enough not to perform for you. I trust you enough to come forward if you want to. Meet me. And from that silence, everything becomes possible. The right man will lean in. He will feel the shift in the air. He will ask questions he wouldn't have thought to ask if you were over-explaining. He will listen. Not just to your words, but to your being. That is the quiet force of feminine power. It's not in how loud you are, but in how still you can be while remaining completely present. And yet, this isn't easy. Choosing silence requires discipline. It requires emotional strength. It requires the ability to sit in the storm of someone else's discomfort without letting it unseat your own truth. This is the essence of Stoicism, the ability to remain unshaken, not because you don't feel, but because you are rooted in something deeper than your feelings. This is what separates a woman who is magnetic from a woman who is merely agreeable. The magnetic woman doesn't chase, doesn't convince, doesn't over-communicate. She invites, she embodies, she creates space, and in that space she becomes unforgettable. So how do you cultivate this kind of silence? You begin by observing your impulses. Notice when you feel the need to explain yourself. Pause. Notice. When you rush to fill a void with humor, questions, or reassurance, pause. Notice when silence feels threatening. Pause and breathe. Then ask, what part of me doesn't feel safe right now? You're not trying to suppress your truth. You're simply learning to express it with presence, not panic. That's the difference. This silence isn't about playing hard to get. It's about being deeply connected to your worth. It's about knowing that not every moment requires your commentary. That sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let someone experience the weight of your presence without interruption. And this isn't just about romantic moments. This is about your daily life. It's how you walk into a room, how you listen, how you wait before reacting. It's how you hold your body when no one is looking. It's how you resist the urge to overgive in conversations just to feel needed. All of that is part of your energetic language. All of that communicates, without a single word, who you are. And here's the beautiful part. When you live this way, you become a tuning fork. People begin to respond to your frequency. Some will feel confused or intimidated. Let them. Some will try to provoke a reaction. Let them. Some will meet your silence with curiosity, with respect, with reverence. These are your people. These are the ones who value depth over drama, presence over performance, and those are the only connections worth keeping, because anything built on noise needs constant volume to survive. But what's built on silence, that is eternal, that is real, that is stoic, and that is who you are becoming. Not just a woman who knows how to speak, but a woman whose silence is so grounded, so rooted in self-trust, that it becomes a force field around her spirit. She doesn't need to shout to be seen. She doesn't need to prove to be believed. She doesn't need to argue to be respected. She just is, and in that being, she becomes unforgettable. 6. Evolve and glow through personal transformation. Let's talk about the kind of beauty that doesn't come from makeup, outfits, or perfect lighting, the kind that radiates from the inside out, that doesn't ask for permission, that transforms a room the moment you walk in without saying a single word. That beauty is born through transformation, not trend, through the hard, unseen work of growth, not gimmicks. And if there's one truth the Stoics understood with precision, it's this: becoming your truest self is the most revolutionary act you'll ever undertake. In Stoic relationships, transformation isn't about performing for someone else. It's about removing every layer that's not really you. shedding identities you outgrew, beliefs that once protected you but now confine you, and versions of yourself built for survival rather than sovereignty. The process isn't always glamorous. In fact, it's often lonely, gritty, and confusing, because to evolve means you must let go of everything familiar, even when familiar isn't good for you. It means saying goodbye to roles you used to play, people you used to please, and stories you used to tell yourself just to feel safe. But here's the magic: when you finally let those parts fall away, you begin to glow. Not in a way that demands attention, but in a way that commands it. You become a walking reminder that wholeness isn't found, it's revealed. That you were never missing anything, you were just buried under too much of what you no longer needed. Growth is magnetic, not because it makes you better, but because it makes you honest. When a man sees a woman committed to her own evolution, it sends a very clear message. I don't need you to complete me. I invite you to grow with me, and that invitation either inspires him to rise or reveals his fear. Either way, it's clarifying. And clarity in Stoicism is everything. Transformation also reveals your real standards, not the ones you post online, but the ones you live by when no one's watching. Because once you evolve, you no longer tolerate what you used to excuse. You no longer bend to fit into relationships that ask you to shrink. You don't chase, because you're no longer looking for something outside of you to make you feel whole. You are whole. That's the energy men feel without you needing to say a word. That's what makes you unforgettable. Think of how nature teaches us this. A snake doesn't cling to old skin. A tree doesn't mourn its leaves. A phoenix doesn't rise without first burning. Nature shows us again and again, letting go is the path to becoming. And your life is no different. Every time you release something that no longer aligns, a fear, a pattern, a person, you make room for something higher, for more light, for deeper peace, for richer connection. And the right man doesn't fear your glow-up. He's drawn to it, because your glow reminds him that love isn't about perfection, it's about becoming together. That's the heart of Stoic relationships. Two people committed to inner growth, not outer image. Two people who don't just love each other, they sharpen each other. But you can't attract that kind of love if you're still hiding in who you used to be. You have to evolve. That evolution starts small, with one decision to choose truth over approval, one step toward purpose instead of performance. One boundary that says, I value myself too much to stay here, and then another and another. Until one day, you look in the mirror and see someone who no longer needs validation to feel powerful, someone who no longer begs for love because she is love. That kind of woman doesn't need to explain her worth. She radiates it. She doesn't need to audition for anyone's affection. She's too busy building a life that feels like her own. And that life becomes a beacon, not for everyone, but for the ones who recognize truth when they see it. Growth doesn't just make you magnetic, it makes you free. And freedom is the sexiest, rarest energy a woman can carry, because it says, I'm not here to be chosen, I'm here to choose who joins me, who matches my energy, who respects my evolution. So ask yourself, what have you been holding on to that no longer fits the woman you're becoming? What part of you feels dimmed by old stories, old fears, old patterns? What would it feel like to finally outgrow the version of you that always needed to be needed? That's the transformation you're being called into, not because you're broken, but because you're ready to rise. And when you rise, everything changes. Your energy, your choices, your presence. You become the woman who walks into a room and doesn't need to say a word, because her evolution speaks louder than noise ever could. If this chapter of transformation resonates with you, if you felt the fire within to evolve, then this is your sign to honor that calling. Like this video, if it touched something true in you, drop number 1 in the comments so I know you're ready to rise. And if you haven't already, subscribe now, because what's coming next will continue to challenge, elevate, and support your journey into stoic relationships and a version of yourself that doesn't just glow, you blaze. When all the noise fades, when the last word has been spoken and the final message sent, what remains is not the memory of what you said, it's the imprint of who you were. That's the unspoken truth of lasting connection. That's the silent revolution happening within you right now, because the kind of worth that lasts doesn't need to be performed. It needs to be lived. Every method you've just absorbed, owning your worth without apologies, recharging your energy, setting unshakable boundaries, releasing control, sitting in confident silence, and evolving into your most luminous self, isn't just about dating, it's about being, about living so fully and authentically in alignment with your own values that love no longer feels like something you have to earn. Instead, it becomes something that reflects back who you already are. That is what Stoicism has always taught, not to suppress emotion, but to channel it, not to reject desire, but to refine it. To live not for reaction, but for integrity. In this modern world, it is radical to be calm. It is radical to trust your energy over your appearance. It is radical to sit still and let others feel the weight of your presence. But that is where your greatest strength lies. You are not here to convince someone of your worth. You are here to embody it. Because when you do, everything shifts. The way people speak to you, the way they hold space for you, the way they show up or fail to, and how little that actually shakes your core when you are rooted in your truth. Your silence becomes sacred, your boundaries become radiant, your energy becomes undeniable, and your evolution becomes the proof, not the promise, of your power. You stop chasing things not because you don't care, but because you know. You know that what aligns doesn't have to be forced. You know that respect, peace, intimacy, these are not luxuries, but baselines. You know that love is not supposed to make you question yourself, shrink your soul, or exhaust your energy just to keep someone interested. Love is meant to meet you, right where you are, and challenge you to rise even higher. But it starts with you, because how you treat yourself sets the tone for every relationship in your life. So if you want to attract something deeper, something real, something lasting, you must become someone who lives from a deeper place, from soul, from silence, from strength. That doesn't mean perfection. It doesn't mean never doubting, never crying, never wishing someone saw you more clearly. But it does mean choosing again and again to return to your power, to your light, to the sacred rhythm of your own growth. You will be tested. You will be tempted to lower your standards, to chase old stories, to quiet your truth so you don't rock the boat. But remember this, any connection that requires you to betray yourself isn't love, it's noise. And you were not born for noise. You were born for harmony. You were born for depth. You were born for a kind of love that doesn't begin in someone else's eyes, but in the way you see yourself. That is what these 6 methods are preparing you for, not just to attract the right man, but to become the kind of woman who is magnetic without effort, who is centered without apology, who is evolving not for approval, but because it is the most honest thing she can do. That is the journey. That is the rhythm. And as you walk forward now, carrying the truth of your own transformation in your energy, in your silence, in your glow, know this: the right people will feel it. They will recognize your calm as power, your stillness as mystery, your boundaries as beauty, and your growth as a signal that they too must rise. That is how change happens. That is how relationships become sacred. Not through manipulation, but through mastery. Not through proving, but through presence. And not through chasing, but through choosing. So choose wisely. Choose slowly. Choose from the truth, not from the wound. You don't need to shout. You don't need to beg. You don't need to dim your light to make someone else feel comfortable. You were never too much. You were just shining around people who weren't ready. But now you are ready, radiant, rooted, and the world will adjust. Because a woman who carries herself like this, who lives her worth without saying a word, is a woman who doesn't just attract a man. She attracts a legacy. Thank you for walking this path. Here's to every silent signal you'll send from this moment forward, and every soul wise enough to receive it.